This is the spiritual download.
Hey everyone, I'm now with my friend Kyle Hilding from Minnesota in the USA. We met some months ago, just kind of randomly although nothing is random, of course. We met for some divine reason a few months ago online, and Kyle kindly interviewed me about my activism and other things, and we talked about spiral dynamics. I was calling myself Matthew Tahanu at the time, and he put the interview on his channel. And since then, I've reverted to using my real name, um, and I thought I could do a better interview. But what we've decided is I'm now interviewing Kyle, and then perhaps we're going to do another one for his channel in a few weeks. Kyle has 500 or so followers on his channel, The Spiritual Download, and it's very interesting. He talks to lots of different spiritual practitioners, meditators, and he's an accomplished meditator himself. So, hey Kyle, how are you doing?
Never better, never better. How's it going for you?
Yeah, not too bad. I've been a bit up and down, as you know. I think with the crisis, the pandemic going on. Um, you really have to face yourself when you can't go out so much. But that's all the more reason to meditate. And yeah, so yeah, I'd love for the viewers, because a lot of the viewers of my channel, although I haven't got many subscribers yet, are going to be mostly interested in activism. But I know that some of them will have a spiritual practice, and in fact, I do know some activists with Extinction Rebellion who do a lot of meditation, and they use it to prepare for actions and so on. So I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in your meditative experience. And I would like to just sort of humanize things by actually finding out about you as a person, as well as you, the meditator. So if you don't mind, I just ask about, for instance, when and where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in 1991, so I'm almost 29, and I'm born and raised in Minnesota, so I'm a up north woods kind of guy.
Okay, so yeah, you can see from the intro on the spiritual download that there's images of you walking outside and in nature and so on. So you're obviously very at home in the outdoors. Is that growing up? Is that where you first gained a sense of spirituality? Do you think, being at one with nature, or was it more from reading books or going to church? Or
That's a really good question. Actually, at first, the first like 16 years of my life, it was all about sports. I really explored. For me, nature was the human form, the human body, and what the human body was capable of doing athletically.
okay,
So I played sports. That was my passion. And then I had a depression in high school where I realized that life was bigger than sports, which was at that time for me a huge realization.
yeah,
That I could really begin to follow my dharma and my spiritual path, which eventually I got into nature, really big into nature and hiking and reading Henry David Thoreau, Leo Tolstoy, watching Into the Wild, and just reading some of those books about being out in the wilderness by oneself and really diving into that feeling of loneliness, but also like expansiveness of nature, and the intimacy that you have with her, with it. Um, but also, I had a really strong philosophy bend. In college, I really dove into philosophy and thinking about life in a really big way. So, asking the biggest questions in life, that was my passion for about 5 years, was asking those questions. So,
great. So you studied philosophy at university, is that?
yeah, yep. Yep, I started with political science, thinking maybe I would be a lawyer, but then I decided that I didn't want to go to college for a job. I wanted to go to college to learn.
Great.
So yeah, so that's why I ended up having two majors, a political science and a philosophy degree. And then upon graduation, I didn't want to continue going to school. I didn't want to start my career. I also didn't want to go to the military, obviously, or anything like that. So I applied to a program to teach English in Ecuador, in South America. So I did that for a year and a half right after university.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So I was next going to ask, it might seem slightly conceited, but it's just playing around with the idea of where you've come from. So I've asked where you've come from in a very real, data conventional sense, but now I wonder what your answer would be if I asked you where you think you've come from in the sense of where has your identity come from? What would you say to that? Where has that come from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Within the last couple of months, my awareness of who I really am on a deep level has expanded on like an exponential level. So like, the beginning of my spiritual path, I thought it was yay big. And then I had a realization and I was like that big. And now I've had realizations and working on the embodiment of the realization of the infinite, infinitude, the infinity of who I am. But it's not just me. It's also, so first of all, it's not Kyle. It's also not you guys, all of us, but it's what we are on the deepest level, right? And it's not even an identity, right? To have an identity, you have to say, I am. But what I'm speaking about is beyond language and beyond even the phrase I am. So it's before speaking.
That's great. So yeah, your true identity is not Kyle, but do you still have? I mean, you must still have a sense of Kyle sometimes, and where has the illusion of Kyle come from? Do you think that the illusion of Kyle is necessary still from day to day?
That's a good question, and I'm very very involved in Kyle. um, and it's more like it's not like when you reach this spiritual realization, it's not that your spirit your excuse me your ego goes away. It's that actually your ego is still there. It's very central in your life, and you're playing that character. However, you actually get more involved with that character because you want to not achieve is not the right word. You want to live a life of greatness through the lens or through that vehicle of your ego or your personality. So you following following that. I've heard the phrase "follow your bliss," follow your greatness, and then you can kind of have this simultaneity or this balance between your deepest identity, so the capital S self, with a small s self, your ego. So you can work together, communicate, or and also or be simultaneously the both.
Okay, yeah, that's a good answer. And do you feel that you're always progressing, or are there some days where you feel you've gone back and then you go forward again in terms of how much you identify with the small Kyle and how much you identify with the larger presence? Is it a kind of fluctuating back and forth, or do you feel like you've reached a certain level and that there's no going back, or is it not that simple?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there is this point in which you don't go back to how you were. A lot of people call that enlightenment. I would call that stage one. um, but continuing on on that path, there are some days where you feel more expansive than other days. So for example, today I woke up tired, and I had to work remotely, and I felt that stress. I felt that like in my heart area, I felt a little kind of I felt tense, and so. But now, as you continue in your spiritual path, what you can do is be mindful of what you consider not spiritual. So I got this realization and this idea from Jeff Foster, if you've heard of him. Jeff Foster, he's British writer and non-dual speaker, teacher. He talks about how it doesn't matter how you feel, allowing those feelings. So oftentimes we don't feel spiritual. So sometimes we think that the goal is to feel spiritual and go on retreats and have
Yeah,
spiritual experiences.
sure, sure.
But in reality, the human feelings, they can be anything. And so the metaphor that he uses is the ocean and the waves. So our emotions are just particular waves. Our egos are particular waves. But the goal is to realize the oceanness of life. There's also a joke where there's two young fish swimming along, and then there's wise old fish swimming the other way. And the wise old fish says, hey, good morning. You guys enjoying the water? And the two fish swim along. They look at each other kind of taken aback or confused. And one of the younger fish goes, what the hell is water?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm talking about is if you're a fish, enjoy swimming in the water.
Okay, that's cool. I'm not quite sure. I understand the fish joke, but I'm not quite sure how that relates to what we were talking about. Can you explain a bit further?
Sure. So the idea is the water for fish it's analogous to consciousness for us. So we're living a life of our life is not actually very boring. Our life is not boring. Even though we experience boredom, that's a human feeling. Naturally, we live inside of this beautiful universe
Okay,
that
I
is
understand.
made of conscious aliveness.
I understand. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Okay. Back to the mundane. Do you live alone or with your folks or
I live alone. I live about an hour away from most of my friends and family. So they all live in the big city in Minneapolis, and I live in a smaller town. I am a school teacher. I work as a history teacher at the high school in town, and this was my first full year. So and school's wrapping up obviously, but we're working from home now. So I'm looking forward to finishing up the year and this summer really dive uh, more deeply into meditation and being outside.
great, great. I heard you mention on in one of your videos making reference to the farm. So you live on is that someone else's farm or how does that work?
Yeah, my uncle has a hobby farm in Texas, so I go there once a year. And then
Okay.
my parents own a cottage. In Minnesota, we call them cabins, but most people call them cottages.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's in northern Wisconsin, which is like 3 hours drive from the big city, Minneapolis. And
Okay.
I go there once a month. Every 3 weeks, I go there and just really get in touch with the pine trees.
Yeah. Great.
Last time I hugged some pine trees, which was very, very great.
Nice. Fantastic. I approve of that. Yeah. Um, so so the so the place. I'm just trying to get a picture of where you live. It's a so you live on a street next to other houses, quite close to other people.
Yeah, I live in a flat. It's an
Right.
old house. I'm going to be moving to the third floor, but I live on the second floor right now. And yeah, it's just
You're ascending.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm continuing to ascend more every day. That's my goal.
great.
So
Are you,
yeah, I live in a like really typical American town. You know, the American dream. But
yeah,
I don't own my own house.
no, no.
I need to. I just live in a flat and pay rent.
Yeah. Do you get on with your neighbors okay? Do you talk to them at all?
Yes, so I'm really good friends with the gentleman who lives above me, who is going to be moving to Iowa, but I'm going to be moving into his place when he leaves. The other people in my house, I don't see very often. And one of the families is originally from Somalia, so the kids speak English, but the parents don't speak English. I just wave and smile.
That's cool. That's cool. That brings me quite nicely onto my next question, actually, because um, something I've been thinking about a little bit recently is a term, what I would term spiritual colonialism, and the idea that we can get into these meditative experiences and think that we have a kind of monopoly on what is the best kind of meditation experience, or the correct path to take. And there are so many YouTube channels now where people teach meditation and talk about meditation, and I just wonder sometimes whether if there's a bit of a dominance of sort of white European and like myself, and white North American like yourself, um, kind of um, a dominant kind of narrative of kind of Western meditation traditions, which maybe don't always take account of spiritual experiences from other people around the world. But that might be I mean, that might be just something that I need to look at for myself. Maybe that's not something that's an issue for you. But what do you think anything about that?
Yeah, I have a lot of opinions about that because I study political science with an emphasis on international politics. I've traveled pretty extensively around the world,
Okay.
um, and I'm really passionate about talking about white male privilege and things like this. One of the main things I've discovered is diving into spirituality and philosophy actually opens your mind about culture because you realize that amazing ideas and amazing stories come from all over the world. And they're all amazing. You could say they're all equally amazing. I don't really know what that means, but
Yeah.
for example, diving into non-Western thoughts through spirituality and philosophy is vital for learning about truth. So it's not even about um, you know having bias that Western or European ideas are the best. It's actually that if you really care about truth, you're going to be diving into ideas from all over the world because
Absolutely.
truth and happiness is universal. It's what makes us us, and we're all brothers and sisters on earth. So some cultures are better at A than others, but then the other cultures are better at B. So for example, in Japan, like Zen Buddhism, their specialty is just sit there meditation, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And in America, we need more of that, right? But in America, what are we good at is constructing materials for people to survive easily. So and America's pretty good at making like iPhones and things like this. But what America is not good at is spirituality, right? Like if you look at America's spirituality, especially white people, I mean this might sound a little bit racist, but a lot of white people's spirituality is old school Christianity and fundamentalist Christianity, which is, sorry to say, but it's very childish based.
Yeah.
You have the Father who has all of the rules, and as
Yeah.
long as
Yeah.
you follow these rules, you're gonna go into this place called heaven. That's not here, because
Yeah.
right here is not perfect.
Yeah.
We don't need to care about this realm. We don't need to care about the planet. People in America say we don't need to worry about the planet because we're going to transcend to heaven after.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous.
and the Mother Mary is kind of relegated to this, small. The female principal is this small little figure, and yeah,
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Catholicism is that Mary is central. The feminism of it is central. But in Protestant, most Americans are Protestant and conservative Protestant for that matter, and it's all about. But I think in America it's called I can't remember the name right now. But basically, like it's not uncommon for pastors in America to be rich because it's all based on money, all based on materialism.
mm,
So that's what's really sad. And what I'm talking about is in America, that's about 30%, 40% of America. A lot of them are white people in the rural areas or in suburbs that have these ideas.
mm. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I'm glad that you've got that. Um, I mean, it's not surprising, obviously, that you've got this awareness of privilege and white male privilege, and because it's something I think about a lot increasingly. And I think as privileged white males, we just have to use our privilege as best we can to serve everyone. Really, I think.
Absolutely, it's definitely about responsibility. How I used to view it as, when I had depression in high school, it was because I had white male guilt. I had friends from Somalia, and I was like, man, like, why do I have all of this privilege and others don't? So the first stage of this is guilt, which I don't think that's wrong. I just think eventually you need this realization, and I think this is either Batman or Superman. But like with power or with privilege, you could shift privilege, power to privilege. With privilege comes responsibility.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah,
There's a reason. There's a reason that you have this privilege, and so using it to and being fearless in that privilege to say, I'm not going to use my privilege for my own benefit. I'm going to use my privilege to serve, basically.
yeah, yeah, definitely. But also, we have to be careful. Have you heard the term "Great White Savior" complex?
Yes, yes, yes.
So,
I use that on my friend used that on a date, his a first date, and didn't have a second date.
oh, right, okay. Your friend was white and the date wasn't white, and he used that. No.
Well, my friend he lived in Africa for a year, and so he was aware of this idea called the white savior complex. And then when he went on a first date with a girl who wanted to go to Africa to help, he's like, "Well, have you heard about this white savior complex
Oh, I
thing?"
see.
And she got mad at him, and so
Oh,
didn't have a second date.
okay. That's interesting. Because with with my channel recently, I've been interviewing some activists on the African continent, um, and I have felt a little bit self-conscious because I've grown up probably well. No, it sounds like you didn't grow up in an all white, but the neighbourhood I grew up in the southwest of England was very, very white. There were only a small handful of non-white people in the school, in the secondary school. So I think I've had, even though I've become quite open-minded, well, very open-minded, I think there's still kind of implicit racism inside me, which is not deliberate. It's just a kind of conditioning because I haven't spent enough time around other different people from different backgrounds. So by interviewing people from the African continent, for instance, on my YouTube channel, I'm starting to challenge myself head on, and it's really good. So I'm quite quickly finding that, of course, skin color doesn't say anything, and I'm learning to not see color, which is good. But of course, in one sense, you do have to see color because people are the victims of racism sometimes, and so on. I just wanted to say, I hope you don't mind. I mean, I do like to do these interviews more like conversations as well. But basically, I've had two very different responses. So the people I've been interviewing, have been generally very grateful. That's partly why I contacted them, because I connected with them on Twitter. And these climate activists kind of say that the African climate activists don't get enough attention. Africa gets ignored relative to many parts of the world in terms of climate activism and many other things. And so they're grateful for me that I'm giving them more of a platform, because they know that, you know, lots of Europeans will watch my channel and they want more exposure and they want more of a platform. So that's kind of like a positive. And then on the negative side, I joined a Facebook group called Africa Climate Activists. And I said, oh, I hope you guys don't mind I'm here, but if you don't, but you know, um, I just want to make connections. And I put one of my videos with one of the African climate activists up, and the admin let me join the group, and the admin said, welcome. And then a couple of people in the Africa Climate Activists wrote some really hostile things underneath my video saying, oh no, not another white European come to save us. And someone else wrote, he's a spy, don't let him in, he's a spy, you know, and stuff like this. And I felt quite sad. I understood it, but I felt quite sad. I felt, oh wow, you've been treated so badly by my ancestors that even now you just assume that I'm bad news. And it turns out I've been ejected from the group. I've been banned from the. I'm no longer a member of that group. I think, I'm pretty sure. It seems like I'm not. And unfortunately, although the admin was happy, it seems like some of the people in the group weren't happy for me to be there. And I just feel so sad that they've had such bad experiences of white Europeans in the past. But yeah, anyway, I am making some good connections, and I'd love
You
to see you. Yeah,
one thing I want to add is like it's it's really important that we emphasize difference and that we all come from different cultures. That's really
yeah,
important because each culture, like I said, has their own like specialty for philosophy, spirituality, economics, whatever. That's what
yeah,
makes us different. But what's even more important is what makes us all brothers and sisters. Like,
yeah,
if we expand our identity to begin to include like I am animals, I am plants, I am the fungus. It's just a continuing to expand your identity of who you are. Now,
yeah,
like the other day, I realized I waved to a man who was Somali in a wheelchair from across the street, and for like the first time, I referred to him as us and not them. Right? Like growing up, I always thought the Somali people in town were like them.
yeah,
They were different.
yeah.
And in my mind, from I don't know what it's from meditation, reading, I don't know, but like I looked
And
at him
travel.
and subconsciously I was like us. He is we.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So what's the deal with? It sounds like is there a big Somali community in the town where you grew up, and why is that?
Yeah, in Minnesota, it's known as Little Mogadishu because so Minnesota historically um, has been very open and open-minded to immigrants
Really?
and helping them find a new home, specifically refugees. So there's a difference between immigrants and refugees. Minnesota helps refugees resettle, and I actually worked during college. I worked for a summer with a refugee resettlement company or nonprofit called Lutheran Social Services, and I worked directly with Somali families who are coming off of the airplane from like Kenya and helping them drive to their new home, sign up for school benefits, whatever. I did that for a summer. And I've had friends from Somalia like most of my life. And right now I teach a bunch of students who are Somali ancestry.
That's great. That's amazing. Yeah, I'm so glad that I'm finally connecting with people from the African continent, because I've not really mixed with, even though the UK is quite mixed. As I say, I've grown up in a part of the UK which is very English, very white English. Sorry, That was racist to say English like that. But that's what I mean. I've got this, still got this, a slight tension in me that I need to transcend. But it is happening thanks to YouTube. So yeah, wow. Um, I'm sure you know what I mean by the difference between engaged spirituality and disengaged spirituality in a kind of social sense. And I wonder if you have anything to say about how your practice is affected by meeting people and talking to people day to day. Because I know that for me, when I get into a space of meditating for a few days in a row and I get into a very calm state, it can be, if I'm not careful and I don't kind of work with it in a good way, it can be kind of messed up when I go out and start talking to people. I kind of, maybe I'm too sensitive to the people I'm talking to, and my calm is destroyed, or either that, or I deliberately don't seek people out and I don't engage with people very much because I'm maybe jealously guarding my peace of mind. And I wonder if you could talk about the challenges of actually being engaged with people, but still maintaining some, still maintaining the peace.
That's a super good question, and this is something I struggle with daily. Um, so the issue is in our minds, we tend to think of it as there is the daily life world, and then there is the spiritual world,
Yeah,
and that those are two different things. In reality, or let me continue with this. So there is a bias. We all have a bias. For example, most people that I know have a bias towards the daily life world, where they think all that reality is daily life, and that's where they put all of their attention. And then there's people, I know a few people like this, not too many, where they put all of their eggs in the basket of spirituality, and thinking that the purpose is to transcend this daily life that it's full of stress and suffering. Why would we want to live here? So that's called spiritual bypassing. But people are using meditation and spirituality, psychedelics, things like this, to transcend this world, of daily life. So, what is the most difficult task in spirituality is to live in both worlds simultaneously. So, that is, for me, stage 2 of awakening, is when you can begin to see the importance of being in this world as an individual in a really good way by serving and learning and helping, but then also being in this transcendent realm, where you understand how consciousness works, how love works, and why it's important to love, and why it's important to be conscious. So have being in both worlds is vital. And I struggle being in specifically the daily life world. I really struggle with that because how do I bring these big philosophical ideas or these big states of consciousness here? How do I bring that here? So um, I mean that is just a question to ask. How do we do it? Practice, speaking with others about how do we connect from that heart to heart level, when people are having way much different experiences, and I don't see any of this as better than anything else. So like living in the daily life is not better than living in the spiritual realm,
no,
and living in the spiritual realm is not better than living in the daily life. It's what is actually not better, but what's healthier is bringing both worlds into ourselves.
yeah, definitely. And you've just brought back some really nice memories for me actually, because although I started off this particular topic by saying I struggle, actually, if I remember now, when I was more kind of in tune, I guess, with my meditative experience in day-to-day living and so on. I think what happens ideally when you've got it right, what happens for me anyway is because you're in a state of relative no self, if you can maintain that when you go out and talk to people, because there's not much identity there, because you're maintaining the consciousness, I think what happens for me is you get this confidence from just being in the moment, and you can mirror people so that instead of when you talk to someone, instead of all your own sort of knotty identity getting in the way, you just naturally mirror the person because there's quite a lot of just space, and you just know, and you just seem to know. I don't know if you've had this experience, but you can just seem to know what to say because you don't think about it, and you're just in the moment. And and when you practice love as well, empathy, it's not only that you, yeah, so that contributes to the mirror. So it's not just that you've got this no mind state, it's also that you've got this empathy of really meeting the person. And so you can almost talk to them in their own language. I mean, I don't do this very much, but I have had times where I've been feeling really confident and this happens. And I've kind of noticed in myself afterwards where it's like, if I meet a lumberjack, I talk to the lumberjack on the lumberjack's level. And that sounds prejudiced, but I'm just using that as an example. Or if I meet the lawyer, I talk to the lawyer on the lawyer's level or whatever. But it comes from a mixture of empathy and having no mind. Have you experienced that kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah, and Matthew, that's a great point, and that just reminds me that it's not that we either live in the daily life or the spiritual realm. It's that they need each other. Like the daily life needs some spirituality, and spirituality needs some daily life. So by living in the middle, we can be in this state of knowing how to love others, knowing how to love ourselves, knowing how to act in the moment. In Taoism, they call it actionless action,
Yeah,
which is
lovely.
just confusing, but I think is the point. I think being confused is the point. So
Yeah,
I, some of my students, like, it's just kind of funny when they get confused. I'm like, that's okay. Being confused is okay, and then they get even more confused.
yeah, that's good. That's great. That's great. Um, yeah, and it's about vulnerability as well, isn't it? Like we have to. I think when you're in the moment and you're engaging with people and you're in the moment, I think you ironically you have to be more open to being making a fool of yourself and maybe saying the wrong thing, or because when you really have empathy and you meet someone and you really engage with someone, then you're taking more of a risk. Like you might misunderstand them, or because like if you're trying, like for me, if I meet some Somali people in my neighborhood, which is extremely unlikely around here, and I try to and I talk to them, I might take a risk because part of me doesn't do that very often. Talk to people very different from me. Um, but I think meditating and practicing empathy, maybe you're more likely to take those risks. Um, Sometimes I don't know. What do you feel like you kind of push yourself a bit more since meditating a lot, or
Yeah,
socially? I mean,
yeah, yeah, and it's not that you are trying to push yourself. It's that through meditation, you are basically deprogramming all of the stuff that you've learned your first
yeah,
30 years of life or
yeah,
however old you are. So
sure,
through that deprogramming process, well, that's why meditation sometimes is actually not smooth. It's not
yeah,
peaceful
yeah, yeah,
sometimes because you're going through all of the crap
yeah,
that
yeah,
you were introduced in life. So when you get deprogrammed from that, you enter back into more of a natural state of being, and in that natural state, there is fearlessness, there is lack of stress, there is being present, and there is being who you really are.
great, yeah, 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 man. Um, I've written down now, linking it to activism a bit, because that's one of the main foci of my channel, YouTube channel, and everything else I do. So I spoke recently to a guy called Mark Ovland, and I don't know Mark very well, but he's a really good guy, nice guy. he's done a lot of meditating. He was actually a Hindu monk at one time, and then he was a Buddhist teacher, and then at quite a famous Buddhist center, Gaia House in the southwest of England here. And then he got involved with Extinction Rebellion, and I was talking to him in our interview about how he meditates to prepare for these really confrontational actions where the police are involved and everything. Um, and so he did a very controversial action, standing on the roof of a train in London with another guy, and I think it was partly as a result of that action. I'm not entirely sure, but he's done several actions where he got arrested with Extinction Rebellion. He then went to prison for a few weeks, and um, he said it was okay. I mean, for a white middle class person to go to prison in this country is potentially not too bad. But he was teaching, some of the other guys when he was out in the prison yard. He was meditating, and some of the other guys were looking at what he was doing and asking, "Oh wow, can you teach me how to do that?" And because he knew that it was a little bit sensitive, like some of the guys would be judged if they started doing that, and they didn't want to be seen as like lesser men or something. So he told me he would slip them. He would write down little meditation instructions and then like just slip them to them when other people weren't looking, so that they didn't lose any so that they didn't lose any cool or whatever. And then later they would tell him, "Oh, thanks, man. That was really good. That's really sorting me out, that meditation." Um, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because Mark was horrified at how a lot of people in Extinction Rebellion reacted to him and his friends standing on top of this train. It was widely seen as a really unpopular action in Extinction Rebellion, and it got into the news for the wrong reasons because some working class people in this poor area of London, like got really angry because they were stopping them going to work, and they pulled Mark and the other guy off the train, and would have beaten them up, some of them, if other members of the public hadn't intervened. And so I was talking to Mark about how recently he's been reading a lot about male privilege, white privilege, oppression, and now he realizes that, two middle class white guys, activists, stood on a train in a really poor part of London protesting about climate change, but actually also just stopping a lot of working class people from going to work. Um, but my point, this is a long story, but the point of it is he's done a lot of meditation, but obviously doing a lot of meditation is not enough. We have to learn about our privilege and how to engage with people not like us. And you obviously do it. I'm starting to do it, but I think there are still far too many white Buddhists who really haven't really questioned their own privilege, and they don't mix with enough, different kinds of people. And I would love to see more engaged spirituality going on in the world, I guess. Um, I'm not sure if I'm saying anything very new to what we've already talked about, but
No, this adds a lot because one of the dangers in spirituality is I mean, one of the first things that you might realize in your spiritual path is that while the outside world, all this physical world, I used to think that it was physical. Now I see it as kind of like magic or not physical or like an illusion. It might appear like a computer program or an illusion. Now, you might have that realization, but the danger is to see it as only that and not to see on the flip side, which is equally real, is that the physical world is super important. It might not be physical all the way down to its core, but it appears as if there are humans, there are animals, and there are plants that have things like in our world, there's inequality, there's racism, there's climate change, which is the number one issue, climate change. So getting involved, being an activist, so using both your mind and your heart in your activism is key, because in your mind, that's where you might get that, or in your gut as well, you might get that anger. So in spirituality, they might say that anger is bad. You shouldn't feel angry. Okay. But for me, when I think about some of these things, like like when I think about what some of the Trump supporters are doing, I get this gut instinct, or also some anger in my mind. How can I make the situation better? So how can I turn this anger, where I just want to fight or flight kind of response, to now I want to engage this with my heart, and I want kind of spiritual activism, kind of more like how Mahatma Gandhi did, Martin Luther King Jr. So studying these people, especially those two, and a little bit of Malcolm X, especially in the second half
Yeah,
of his life.
yeah.
Maybe not in the first half as much, but learning about how did the masters do it? How did the masters of nonviolent activism, how did they do it?
That's great, and you show some good intuition there, because my next question was, is there such a thing as righteous anger? Um, and that's interesting. So you talk about um, converting the anger into something more productive, maybe. But I would argue that possibly, if it's in the moment, if it's really in the moment, and you're not, and there's something about sometimes the way some activists express anger that I've experienced. Not always, don't get me wrong. Sometimes it's not like this, but sometimes if you have such a deep love for nature and you can see so clearly that something's wrong, and it just comes up in a moment and you shout, no, that's wrong. That kind of anger, I think, if it's really in the moment and it's clearly not directed against a person, but what the person's engaged in, and you say the right words without thinking, I think actually that is a kind of righteous anger, and it can be very angry, but it's not. I think it can be. You can see that there's love underneath it. Um, would you say that's true, or would you say that you should always try and step back and reflect first?
Sometimes things just happen in the moment, and this is the key, is knowing that it is an automatic response. And it's not really you. A lot of times, automatic responses come from deep inside of us. That is the animal side of us, or what we learned in school, right? Like for me, I didn't grow up in a tough neighborhood or anything like that. So, I wasn't in wrestling matches with my
Uh,
friends or anything like that. So, but if you were, you're used to that. You might enter into that mindset. Okay, now it's the time to fight. You know, and for me, I don't think there's anything wrong with that if it's in your karma. But the key is think about the long term. How can I be a little bit more like Martin Luther King Jr. in the
yeah,
future? Right? How can I have a little bit more righteousness? And what's ironic about some, animal rights people and people who are activists for climate change, what, why are they so passionate about it? Is because of care, right? Peace and care for the world. But when you have this duality between, okay, there's that, and then there are human beings that are ruining everything. But can we begin to see that this is all part of, Earth, or it's all part of this grand ecosystem of, it all has the same equation of suffering, the same equation of happiness. So seeing that the human being that you're yelling at, what makes that human being different than like a grizzly bear that you love out in the forest? Because for that person, it's the opposite, right? They overvalue human beings over the grizzly bear, right? So it's two ends of the spectrum. How can we begin to see that no matter what, whether they're human, bears, plants, how can we begin to all see it as our Mother Earth, or it's all the universe, or it's all consciousness?
yeah,
So suffering, for me, suffering is suffering. It doesn't matter if it's a plant suffering or a human being suffering. But I would probably argue that human beings because of we have a lot of consciousness, much more concentration of like intelligence and consciousness than a plant does. Human beings probably potentially could suffer more, but that's just, I guess I used to think about that stuff, but now for me it's just like, it's a plant, it suffers. If it's an animal, it suffers. If it's a human, it suffers. So for me, it seems to be, how can we reduce suffering overall?
Yeah, yeah, that's very beautiful. And just for the record, I would never dare shout at a grizzly bear.
Yeah, that's not in the safety tips.
No,
If you see a grizzly bear, don't just yell at it.
no, probably not. um, yeah, I think, okay, this might be a bit controversial, but I do agree with you, and it is all about lessening suffering. But I don't know if you know this, but some research has been done about the CEOs of some of these companies, like oil companies and CEOs of companies in general. And there is a kind of psychopathic personality type where people who don't seem to have much empathy for other human beings or for life, not always, but sometimes seem to rise to the top of these organizations. And so you've got a situation, and people like Trump, where, although I think he might be more narcissistic type, but you've got a situation where there are narcissists as well as psychopaths ruling the planet. And sometimes I just think, okay, yes, I can have some empathy for them on a spiritual level, but things are getting so bad with the climate crisis and so on that it's almost like this might be, I know I have to be careful, this could be considered a perversion of spiritual teachings, but sometimes I believe that I'm seeing some of these people, I am seeing them on a human level, but also I'm seeing that things on the level of no self. And because I can see such destruction coming to humanity, it's almost like these people are big blocks of energy, big, like, knotted blocks of energy that we have to remove. I don't mean kill them. I don't want to kill people or hurt people, but it's almost like on a physical level, they're like these blocks of ignorance, and I almost want to shout at them, not as human beings, but I just want to get rid of the blocks, the energy blocks. And I think um, sometimes maybe there are other activists as well, I suspect, that get to that point where they're trying to feel empathy for these people as human beings, like, for instance, the CEOs of oil companies and so on, but they end up just seeing them as these physical, energetic obstructions. And it's so hard to practice then just empathy, and because we need to, it's almost like on just from the laws of physics, we need to remove these obstructions in order for life on Earth to flourish. Um, but I know that's a bit dodgy, and you could end up then justifying assassinating people if you go down that route. But I wonder if you have any empathy at all with that kind of point of view.
Yeah, on some level, I am utilitarian, meaning that like I do think that it's important to consider what is the greatest good, um, and but also, and I've also learned in my spiritual path that sometimes we as humans do not understand God's path or God's plan. Um, I just think that this universe is so imbued with beautiful intelligence that oftentimes we as humans, we have a self-bias towards human beings,
Yeah,
um, that we can't understand some of these reasons that, I mean, why are there oil CEOs? I really don't know. I don't have an answer, a rational answer for that. But I can guarantee you that God knows why. um, and so for me personally, the first thing the first thing I feel is anger and frustration for why do we need all of this fossil fuel usage, you know. And I realize it's because I love the earth. And then on another level, it's like, well, this CEO, who are they?
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason that they got there. Um, and a lot of it is ignorance. I mean, like a lot of us, like for me, for example, I'm full of ignorance. But the
Yeah.
problem is I don't know how I'm ignorant. I don't know in what way I'm ignorant
Same
or
here.
where it is. Because I'm a limited human being. I
Yeah.
have inherent ignorance. I just because I'm limited, I don't know where that is. So that's why I ask God for help. Like, God, please help me. I don't know how to be enlightened. I don't know how to love. I don't know how to be myself. I need help, right? So thinking about that and praying for the people who are CEOs to have hopefully wake up one morning and have this realization like, holy crap, I'm like hurting the planet big time. What can I do? Now, unfortunately, because of the karma or the structure of that person's, their mind, their body, their soul, they're not quite ready to realize that yet. They come from an older mentality of let's overconsume, let's exploit. But they wouldn't use these words that we would use nowadays. But they're living in that older mentality of like the Industrial Revolution, because they're thinking about how can I survive. So it might seem like their survival is easy, right? But for them, being the CEO of an oil company is surviving. That is survival. So for them, if they're not that, it's like that or death. And that's the mentality that they have.
Yeah.
So that's why, I mean, now how do we fix the problem at the root? Instead of assassinating CEOs, how can we really solve this problem? Like, how do we find the root of the problem, right? Finding the root of the problem, educating our young people. That's the first thing. And then how do we do that? What are the biggest values? Well, instead of hard work, like we've taught everybody, where does hard work end up is we consume. If we work hard, this is just basic physics. We work hard, we need things to feed us in that hard work. So instead of that, how do we slow down the hard work and slow down the consumption and be here? How do we learn to be here? So focusing on yourself is number one. How can I be better? Instead of thinking about these, I mean, yes, you can think about it, but it requires so much energy to think that these CEOs are ruining the world. Okay, but I am part of the problem, right? We're all a part of this problem. No matter how hard it is to swallow, we're all a part of this problem of climate change, of not being spiritual. We're all equally guilty. So how do we work on ourselves, right? And that's the purpose of, I would say, the spiritual path.
Okay, I mean that is great and beautiful, and I do agree with you on to a point, but um, it's been said quite a lot that we need systemic change, not just individual change. And yes, everyone needs to change as an individual, but also systems need to change, and sometimes uh, individual change isn't enough when system change is needed. It would be in an ideal world if every single human being was working on themselves, but the sad reality is, well, I don't know. I don't want to be too conceited or arrogant. I have no idea how many people are trying hard inwardly and trying really hard to work on themselves. I have no idea, but by looking at the world, it would seem to be not not very many. So what you say is true, but what you say is true. But as you know, I mean, you interviewed Guy McPherson, didn't you?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
A little
So
over a year ago.
yeah, that was quite some time ago. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, he's a controversial figure. I think he goes too far, and so I think some of his sources are a bit suspect and stuff. But anyway, he's a good reference point because he's on the extreme end of the climate science in terms of And there are some other people who are near where he is, maybe not, but not quite so extreme, who still think that, you know, human civilization could collapse within a decade. Um, and then humanity itself could die out not long after. So when the time frame seems so short, it just feels hard to trust. I mean, obviously, I do work on myself. I am meditating and so on, but I know I just know that the whole world isn't going to do the same thing. So so at that point, it's almost like sometimes I sacrifice my spiritual practice because it's almost like I do get angry sometimes, and I know that it's not the right thing, but if I choose to just work on myself, maybe that's not the right thing for the end of the world. You know, if it's the end of the world or the end of humanity. But maybe that, I mean, I don't think that's really true. I think there's always going to be a place. I think we need more people becoming monks and nuns, for instance, right now than ever before. I think we really do actually need that. But I think maybe there's also a role for other people to specifically not spend so much time meditating. But that's a bit shady. I'm not quite so sure. We certainly need action in the world. Um, I mean, the ideal would be that everybody meditates for half a day and then does activism for the other half of the day. For me, if everyone was doing that, then everything would be okay really quickly. But that's not happening, and I think now more than ever we need a time of heroics as well as meditation. We need, but you know, then again, meditating can make you heroic. It can make you, you know, calm enough and strong enough. If you look at Gandhi, he was a heroic figure. So Martin Luther King Jr. was a heroic figure. So um, I've really gone off on one then.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. I was just gonna say that, like, that's important to know that. I mean, what we're proving is that this stuff is complicated. How complicated it is to do activism well. So I say trusting yourself is really important. Trusting your resources is super important, such as, you know, maybe reading about Martin Luther King. Like in high school, I read his book, The Strength to Love. Man, and still to this day, I'm thinking about, man, strength to love. I always thought love was like just soft and, you know, but when you combine that like masculine type with when you combine masculinity and femininity, it's like those two forces come together in such a perfect balance. It's unstoppable. It's unstoppable. The strength to love, and that's just one example. And along the lines of like, it is complex idea is, we as humans, we can't know the unintended consequences of some of our actions. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying, trying to find the humility in this phrase. I don't know how to. I don't know how to help. But just by saying that, and just like by admitting it, you get this clairvoyance, or this clear view of like, oh, it can be literally like you turn around 180 degrees, or sorry, yeah, 180 degrees. It's like, oh, that's the way. And like it comes in like a real, an epitome. No, that's not the word.
Epiphany.
Epiphany. Epiphany. So leaving space for like, oh, that's what I can do. You know, like, for example, maybe it's not everybody's path to go on 10-day meditation retreats. And I know that that's not everybody's path. You know, really, that's not even my path either. But in some ways, but just Yeah, trusting the process in both activism and spirituality is so key. It's so key.
Okay, that's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. Trusting the process. And so going with that and trusting the process of this conversation, it feels to me like um, I'm happy to kind of wind up about now. Um, does that feel okay to you?
Yeah, this was great, and this is helping me think about how do I engage in the world, right?
Yeah,
How can I step up? How can I step up?
fantastic, fantastic. And yeah, I'm really pleased. Um, part of me was wondering about talking to you, Kyle, and how it would fit in with the current focus of my channel and so on. But but it's been really rich, and it's very clear to me that it's very enriching of talking about the stuff we've been talking about. Is very enriching of activist experience and my activist experience. And now going forward, this is perfect because now I'm just about to arrange like a new batch of interviews with activists. So now going into my next kind of round of interviews with activists, I'm going to really take this conversation with you. I'm going to take it into my heart and think back. And as I'm talking to the Fridays for Future strikers and Extinction Rebellion people and so on, I'm going to remember this conversation with you and sometimes, yeah, reground myself and recenter myself with, for want of a better word, a more spiritual perspective um, on some of the things I talk about with the activists. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, sure. If I could make a few concluding thoughts here, or just kind of a
Sure.
concluding statement, is how I see the world is that we are all in this together. Like, I know that's a simple phrase and like probably overused, but we can see this in the time of COVID-19 and the time of climate change. We need to see that there's more unity together than there are barriers. Working together and seeing that we are one human team, like we can solve this together. We can make this world a better place by living through and living with this mentality that we are one human family.
Absolutely. Okay. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, yeah. Peace and love to everybody. Thank you, Matthew.
Okay. Thank you too. Speak soon.